A battle-scarred gunslinger taught a ranch girl to shoot. He froze when her old bullet wound matched his mark. The stockyard was sun-scorched, steeped in weariness, tension, and a thin shard of hope. Joaquin Dustwing Rivas stood by the splintered corral fence, oiling the cylinder of his battered peacemaker as if it were a priest's chalice. His movements were spare, precise habits honed in darker days, yet his gray gaze flicked restless toward the cook fire, where a harmonica's phantom note drifted. He wiped sweat from the tattooed bullet scar on his wrist, but the stain beneath his ribs' memory of a child's scream would not scrub clean. Tonight the baddest bunch this side of the Pecos was rumored to ride in sniffing for the turncoat who'd cost them blood and loot. Joaquin reckoned they'd sniff right. Still, he stayed. Maybe a cowpoke could square the ledger with bone and lead. A folded letter of absolution bulged in his pocket unopened. He couldn't read salvation until he'd earned it. The wind kicked red dust whispering like a judge's gavel. Something wicked was slogging up the trail, and the night aimed to cash its chips. The sky over Gravel Bend cracked open in pale bands of copper spilling dawn across scrub and mesquite. Joaquin Dustwing Rivas rode slow, letting his paint mare nose around cactus thorns, while he studied Whitfield Ranch, 3 clappered bunkhouses, a stone cook shack breathing wood smoke, and a restless ocean of longhorns clattering in their pen. Wind hissed through brittle grass, and Joaquin tasted dust and memory in equal measure. He dismounted at the gate. Sam Lee thrust a payroll ledger at him without a smile. Name, Joaquin Rivas. The syllables rasped. The outlaw name he'd once worn stayed buried beneath them. He signed with deliberate care while Otis Brown and Skinny Lewis watched half curious, half wary, like dogs sniffing a storm they couldn't see. Footsteps sounded Eleanor Whitfield, black duster, flaring silvered hair loose in the wind. Her calm gray eyes took the measure of Joaquin's scar-braided face. Father McCall writes that you want honest work. The way she said it made honesty feel like an untested tool. Yes, ma'am. I can mend fence cut sign, keep quiet. Quiet's a virtue so long as it isn't hiding rot. She nodded toward the cook shack. Coffee then, saddle up for day duty. Tonight you draw first watch rustlers have been sniffing the herd. Inside, flour dust drifted in golden shafts. Callie Swallow Harper Lanky and 13 stood on a crate stirring biscuit dough braid, swinging like a horse's tail. A low harmonica note wandered from her lips, half tune, half habit. She looked up, freckles bunching. "Coffee'll knock rust off your tongue," she said, sliding a tin mug across the scarred table. Joaquin drank, trying not to stare at the faint seam of scar tissue peeking above her apron strap. A harmonica warble rose, minor and raw, tugging open a sealed memory smoke, screams his own pistol bucking in blind panic, a child collapsing. He set the mug down and stepped back into morning glare. Heat gathered fast. By noon, he'd restrung wire-set posts straight and listened to rumors skitter on the wind. Razor's gang robbed a freight wagon at Dry Fork, left the driver breathing just long enough to curse a deserter named Dustwing. Each whispered word settled on Joaquin's shoulders like hot ash. He ducked behind the livery to unwrap a folded letter, the governor's seal, Father McCall's neat script promising a full pardon once Joaquin appeared in person. Parchment meant nothing against ghosts. He crushed it into his vest pocket and returned to work. Supper brought beef stew and wary glances. Callie's ladle clanked. A tremor rippled through her wrist. Light from the lantern revealed the old scar along her ribs. Joaquin forced himself to swallow stew, turning to gravel in his mouth. "Rustlers won't try a moonless night," Otis muttered around his spoon. "They favor easy herds," Joaquin answered. Silence closed like a vault. At dusk he climbed the north tower. The plain lay black cattle pressing into nervous silhouettes. Guilt prowled louder than coyotes. Near midnight, 2 figures snipped wire cutters flashing. He fired a single warning shot. Dust sprayed their boots, and they fled into darkness. Echoes slammed his skull, the smell of powder thick as sin. Returning, he found Callie on the porch blanket around shoulders, harmonica glinting. "You scare 'em off," she asked. "For tonight." "Hard to sleep when the dark's groaning," she said, and lifted the harmonica. The tune she coaxed, low sorrow steady, settled the cattle and his racing pulse at once. He almost confessed everything, the round that tore her childhood, the pardon he didn't deserve. Instead, he touched his hat brim and walked into starlight. Hours later, first light seeped over the horizon, paling the corral rails, the barn rafters, the hands stirring from bunks. Joaquin washed gunpowder from his palms, but the scent lingered. Razor was coming. Rumor carried his promise like a brand. Joaquin stared east where the sun bled upward and wondered which judgment would strike first, bullets fired by old brothers or the gaze of a girl discovering who had nearly ended her life. Either way, the day would demand his ledger paid in full. He holstered his peacemaker, feeling the steel's cold weight, and stepped into the newborn light, unsure whether it heralded blessing or reckoning, but knowing he would no longer run from either. Sun crouched low and red when Joaquin finished the night watch, yet he never touched breakfast. Instead, he saddled his mare, bedroll-cinched canteen full. He told himself it was just a supply ride to Father McCall's mission, but his pulse knew better. Grit scraped in the governor's pardon, he unfolded a smear of dried blood, now crossed the seal smeared by an unknown hand that had pushed the letter under his bunk. A promise and a warning in the same breath. He shoved it deep inside his vest. Bootsteps padded behind him. Callie Harper straddled the corral rail braid, dangling eyes sharp as flint. "Heading somewhere, Mr. Mission Run," Joaquin muttered. "Pack like that's a one-way trail." Wind rattled the gate chain. He didn't answer. "If you leave," she said, "who's going to scare off Razor? Sam says he'll carve the ranch like Christmas ham." Joaquin's chest tightened. He swung the saddle down. "Can you shoot with a spoon?" She scoffed, but fear quivered under the joke. "Grab a .32. 10 minutes behind the hayshed." They stole to a bone-dry arroyo where dust swallowed sound. A rusty coffee can perched on a mesquite limb 20 paces out. Callie's small pistol bucked in her grip, first shot, wide, second shot low. Joaquin corrected her stance, steadying slim wrists with scarred fingers. Close like that, he heard her breath hitch, part excitement, part old panic. On the fourth squeeze, the can spun, clanging off the limb. She gasped, half amazed, half horrified by her own power. "Again," he said softly, and again, until 5 smoking shells lay in the sand. When they turned back, hoof prints marred the arroyo mouth, fresh deep, leading toward the ridge. Joaquin's hand drifted to his Colt. "Spy sign," he murmured. He hurried Callie home, every nerve lit. Afternoon heat flattened the yard. While cowboys branded calves, Eleanor Whitfield rode fence lines, eyes narrowing at distant dust plumes. Joaquin repaired a gate latch, but dread hammered nails faster than he did. When Eleanor dismounted beside him, he passed her the blood-stained pardon. "This ink?" she asked. "Likely not." She inhaled. "Run if you must, but fear spreads quicker than fire. Whitfield Dustwing, whatever we become won't bow to outlaws." Those words, plain as pine, nailed him to the ground, harder than any spike. Supper smelled of chili stew, but no one spoke much. Lantern light jittered over rifles propped against the table. Callie ladled bean sleeve, hiding the pistol now strapped under her apron. Outside, dusk pooled purple. Then hoofbeats clopped and halted roadaway no knock. Otis cracked the door. A riderless mule grazed the dust, a burlap sack tied to the saddle horn. Joaquin's gut rolled. Sam and he approached, shotguns up. The sack dripped something dark. Joaquin loosened the knot. A severed coyote head thudded out, lips peeled over yellow fangs. A queen of spades was pinned to its ear with a mesquite thorn, Razor's old calling card. Eleanor's voice sliced the hush. "Get that filth buried. Double the guard." They dug a shallow grave beyond the last post. As soil thumped over the grisly gift, wind shifted carrying the smell of rain that never came. Joaquin lifted his gaze to the ridge where dusk met starshine. A single lantern glimmered was snuffed. "They're counting rifles," Sam muttered. "Let 'em count," Joaquin said, though his stomach felt hollow. He loaded fresh rounds last cylinder the carved feather slug he never fired. Night dropped thick. Joaquin paced perimeter with the windmills squealing overhead. At the east fence he found new tracks, 8 horses, disciplined spacing prints sharp within the hour. He knelt palm on cooling dirt and heard Razor's lazy drawl drifting from memory. "Smoke 'em out at dawn, boys? Judas bleeds first." He pictured the cook shack in flames, Callie's harmonica silenced. A cold decision settled on him like dew. He would not run again. Near 2 bells he returned to the porch. Callie waited, harmonica glinting. She said nothing, only pressed a rag-wrapped bundle into his hand, 6 bright .45 shells she'd spent the evening polishing. For when the dark groans worse, she whispered. He forced a smile. "We'll groan louder." She almost smiled back. Before first light he rousted every hand. Firing holes were dug, water barrels filled. Kerosene moved far from barns. Eleanor climbed the hayloft with a Spencer dark coat flapping like a battle flag. Callie stationed herself inside the cook shack window pistol braced on a flour barrel. Peach glow crept across the knoll. Joaquin took position between corral and bunkhouse, the hinge on which both wings of defense would swing. Every heartbeat ticked like a distant hammer striking steel. Hoofbeats answered. 15 silhouettes rode out of the glare dust banners curling behind them. Razor headed the column shotgun laid across his pommel queen of spades, tucked in his hatband smile, cold as river ice. Joaquin stepped forward. Colt loose at his side voice, carrying above cattle nerves and human fear. Ranch's closed Razor. "Turn around." The outlaw laughed, lifted his shotgun, and the world inhaled, holding breath for the first crack of war. The moment hung taut. Then Razor's shotgun boomed. The blast ripped a gate plank splinters whirring past Joaquin's cheek. Buckshot thundered across the corral as ranch rifles answered, lighting the dawn with staccato muzzle flares. Dust and powder smoke mingled, choking breath. Steers bawled, surging against rails. Joaquin knelt behind a water trough, firing measured shots that drove 2 raiders scrambling for cover. His world shrank to noise recoil, the metallic click of the Colt's hammer. After 3 minutes that felt like hours, Razor pulled his riders back beyond rifle reach and laughed into the rising sun. "That's today's foretaste, Dust Wing." Sundown brings the banquet hooves thundered off toward the ridges, leaving the yard littered with spent shells and a single wounded outlaw groaning by the north post. Eleanor ordered triage. The man died before noon, whispering that Razor had a holier ace up his sleeve. It arrived near sunset. A lone rider horse, lathered, slumped in the saddle. Joaquin's gut twisted even before he recognized the clerical collar. Father McCall slid to the ground, coat-shredded wrists lashed raw. Sam and Otis rushed him into the bunkhouse. Lamplight showed a broken cross stuffed into his pocket and fresh bruises blooming purple along his ribs. "They caught me on the mission road," he rasped, gripping Joaquin's sleeve. "Said to deliver this." He pressed a gleaming .45 cartridge into Joaquin's palm. Feather scratched along the brass, the word "Dust Wing" gouged beneath. "And to tell you," McCall continued at dawn, "they'll burn the ranch unless the traitor stands in ashes first." Callie hovered in the doorway, braid, trembling. Joaquin pocketed the carved round, but she'd already seen the letters. Shock widened her eyes before she turned away, vanishing into the shadows. McCall slumped onto a cot. Eleanor mixed laudanum while Joaquin stalked outside, breath ragged. He hadn't felt this trapped since Sonora, the night smoke blinded him, the child's scream, the bullet he'd never forgiven. Now, Razor meant to replay the nightmare with Callie as pawn. He found her behind the tool shed, sitting on an old grindstone. Moonlight silvered the scar along her ribs. In her hands, she rolled an empty dented casing, 36 caliber rim flattened. The same crooked feather was scratched on its shell. "Blacksmith gave me this," she said without looking up. "Found it near the trail months ago. Said the marking might bring luck. Took me a while to remember why it hurt to touch." Her voice was quiet, balanced on a knife edge. "Callie, you shot me, a statement, not a question." She finally raised her gaze, fury and grief mingling. "I was 7. My mama said some outlaw band tore through our wagon camp. One bullet found me. The doctor dug out lead, but left nightmares. Joaquin's throat worked uselessly. There was smoke everywhere. I heard a scream and fired blind, trying to protect the gang's flank. By the time haze cleared," he swallowed. "I ran. Ran here, hid behind another name, another gun." She flipped the casing so it clinked on the grindstone. "Why should this ranch bleed for you? Because Razor won't stop at me. He'll raid, burn, kill, and blame the ashes on whoever's left breathing." Callie stood, fists small but shaking. "Give yourself up then. Trade you for us." Joaquin closed his eyes. The idea of kneeling before Razor, the shotgun's muzzle in his skull, easy. The harder path was living another day standing guard for people he'd already harmed. "My death is a down payment, not a guarantee," he said softly. "But if I stay fight, maybe I can tip the scales." Callie's breath hitched. "And if you miss again, then you take the second shot." He unbuckled his holster, drew the Colt, and handed it to her butt first. She hesitated, fingers brushing scarred leather, then accepted the weapon with a trembling exhale. At midnight, they built barricades, hay wagons tipped on their sides. Flour barrels rolled into firing pockets, lanterns doused to hold darkness as ally. McCall, dozing under morphine, quoted scripture in dreams. Eleanor patrolled with a Spencer cloak, snapping in the chill breeze. Joaquin climbed the lookout ladder, Callie at his heel. From the platform, the plain lay black except for a single campfire flicker on the far ridge, Razor watching, waiting. Joaquin loaded the Peacemaker, 5 standard rounds, then the engraved cartridge in the 5th chamber. Callie noticed. "That the ghost bullet. It's the one meant for Razor or me. Either way, ledger closes." She slipped the empty casing necklace over her head, letting it hang beside the harmonica. "If daylight comes," she said, voice steadier, "teach me that 5 count we practiced. I'll pass it to every kid who signs on here. Daylight will come." He didn't know if it was promise or prayer. Wind carried a faint harmonica note, hers too quiet for anyone but them. It wound around the night like a vow and settled Joaquin's pulse. He watched stars wheel, felt the seconds crawl toward dawn and whatever verdict they carried. For the first time since Sonora, he did not dread the sun's light. He awaited it armed with confession resolve and the fragile hope that forgiveness, once spoken, might yet hold against gunfire. Below, cattle shifted, uneasy, but alive. Above, the last star dimmed. Razor's campfire winked out. Steel clicked in the dark as Callie cocked the Colt. Joaquin drew breath, tasting dust, and the faint sweetness of wild sage, the scent of a clean start if they could wrest it from the coming blaze. Dust rolled off the riders in choking waves as they reined short of the corral. Razor stood in his stirrups, black duster, flapping eyes glittering with amusement that never reached his scarred cheeks. Folks he called voice smooth as snake oil. "I'm here for the feather-marked traitor. Hand him over and your day stays bright as buckwheat honey." No one moved. Joaquin felt the Peacemaker's walnut grip warm against his palm. 5 regular rounds, the 6th, engraved with his old sin. Fear tremored along his spine, then flattened into purpose. "You want me, come fetch," he shouted back. Razor's grin widened. Sure enough, boys kindle hospitality. 2 riders swung off and heaved kerosene slosh pots over the nearest haystack. Flames whooshed skyward, turning dawn gold into furnace orange. Cattle bawled, thrashing against corral rails. Sam Lee fired first, dropping a torchman into the dust. The ranch erupted, rifles cracked, bullets sparked off pump rods lead. whined past Joaquin's ear. He knelt behind a wagon tongue, squeezed off shots that pinned 3 outlaws behind a water trough. Wind kicked suddenly hot and gritty, an early spring sandstorm rolling off the mesa. Smoke and dust tangled slashing sight lines. Eleanor barked orders from the porch, her Spencer rising and falling with calm precision. Somewhere to Joaquin's right, Skinny's repeating rifle rattled frantic 5-shot bursts, then cut off in a yelp. Through the murk, a bandana-masked brute hauled Skinny out by the collar gun, to his head, boot heels furrowing dirt. "Hostage," the thug bellowed. "Drop him or kid loses light." Joaquin's pulse slammed. Skinny fought scrawny limbs jerking. The outlaw cuffed him, knocking the boy limp. Joaquin rose, intending to advance, then caught Callie's silhouette by the cook shack corner. She steadied her tiny pistol on a flour barrel muzzle, quivering. One mispull, and Skinny was dead. Joaquin waved her back. She shook her head braid, whipping in grit. Lightning crackled inside the dust cloud, static sparks from sand grains colliding. Thunderless flashes lit fleeting tableau of men guns' terror. Razor's voice sliced the chaos. "Dust wing, trade yourself for the pup. Or we roast the ranch to kindling." Joaquin weighed angles. Surrender, guaranteed Razor's private execution, maybe mercy for the others unless Razor torched the place anyway. But letting Skinny die, impossible. He lifted his revolver, stepped clear of cover. "I'm here." He advanced, coat rippling. Callie screamed, "No!" A raw sound stripped of hatred now, only fear. The hostage-taker dragged Skinny toward Razor's horse. Joaquin closed to 15 paces, dust stinging eyes. He raised both hands, peacemaker dangling by the trigger guard. The rider shoved Skinny forward, meaning to bind him. An eddy ripped dust aside. Joaquin saw the outlaw's face, barely older than Skinny, sweat streaking fear beneath bravado. For a heartbeat, hesitation gleamed. Joaquin exploded. He flung the revolver up-thumbed hammer and fired without sight. The engraved round roared out, catching the youth's gun hand. Pistol flew. Skinny dropped flat. Joaquin rolled sideways as Razor's shotgun belched buckshot, shredded empty air. 2 more outlaws lunged. Sam and Otis cut them down, silhouettes blinking in lightning glints. Sand howled harder, turning morning to smudged twilight. Joaquin crawled to Skinny, yanked him clear. "Stay low," he muttered, shoving the boy toward the windmill. Another blast rocked the ground kerosene barrel, igniting the hay barn. Heat seared Joaquin's cheek. Razor's laughter drifted eerie through swirling grit. "Heroics, Dustwing. Thought you'd lost taste for blood." He advanced, loading fresh shells. "I remember, Sonora, how you froze until smoke cleared enough to plug a kid. Bet the little harmonica girl's here too." Joaquin edged toward the cattle chute, empty revolver useless until reloaded. A figure darted ahead, Callie apron billowing, pistol clutched. She ducked behind a feed bin 10 yards from Razor. Heart hammering, Joaquin shouted back Callie. She didn't flinch, her jaw set like carved pine. She rose, pistol aimed at Razor's chest. The outlaw swung the shotgun toward her. Joaquin sprinted, lungs tearing. Time-tunneled dust grains hung like sparks, Razor's finger whitening on both triggers, Callie's eyes wide, yet steady. Joaquin leapt, shoulder-slamming Razor's barrel aside. Twin blasts erupted skyward, shredding clouds of sand. They hit the ground hard. Shotgun skittered away. Razor cursed, drawing a bowie. Joaquin grabbed his wrist. Steel flashed. Callie screamed, rushing with the tiny pistol, but first she clubbed Razor's temple. He reeled, slashed blindly, blade grazing Joaquin's flank. Blood warmed his shirt. Joaquin rammed a knee to Razor's chest, ripped the knife free, tossed it aside. Razor heaved, furious. "You owe me souls, Judas." His fist caught Joaquin's scarred wrist. Pain burst white. Joaquin headbutted him, felt bone crack. Razor slumped but snarled on. Joaquin drew the revolver, swung open the gate finger fishing cartridges with shaking speed. Razor clawed for the bowie again. Callie scooped the knife first, flipping it into the dirt behind her. Razor launched at her. Joaquin thumbed a round home, snapped the cylinder, fired. The slug punched Razor's shoulder, spinning him. Second shot smashed knee. He toppled, spitting curses into sand. Around them the firefight waned. Outlaws fled into swirling tan silhouettes, shrinking. Sam's rifle cracked one final time. Silence dropped, broken only by the barn's crackle and cattle's nervous bawls. Wind eased dust, thinning to a brown haze. Callie stood over Razor, pistol leveled. The outlaw bled, sneering. "Do it, girl. Finish what Judas started." Her hands shook, yet eyes burned steady. Not today. She backed off. Joaquin took her shoulder, lowering the pistol. Razor glared, pain-drugged. Joaquin knelt, pressing the peacemaker's barrel between Razor's eyes. Old reflex screamed to end it, but another voice, Callie's, echoed, "Stand between, not above." He holstered. Eleanor strode up, carbine smoking. "Tie him," she ordered. Cowboys scrambled to shackle Razor, drag him toward the bunkhouse cellar. Flames licked the barn, but Otis and two men had pumps spraying. Fire sagged, sparks dying. Callie suddenly swayed. Joaquin caught her, his knees buckled. "I'm fine," she protested, tears cutting dust on her cheeks. He felt her pulse galloping. "You didn't miss." She whispered a confession, a blessing. Joaquin pressed his blood-slick hand over the old casing strung on her neck. "Neither did you." Overhead, the sandstorm broke apart, revealing a patch of blue as clean as baptism water. Smoke curled from blackened rafters, but the main house still stood. Corral rails held cattle, restless yet alive. Razor's gang had scattered, leader captured. The ranch breathed. Joaquin helped Callie onto a hay bale. She drew her harmonica, lips trembling. The single low note rose, no longer mourning, but wary hope, trembling like a fawn, yet unbroken. Joaquin listened, side throbbing, and for the first time believed dawn might belong to them rather than their ghosts. Joaquin woke to thunder in the cellar chains, rattling, a rasp of iron on stone, and Skinny's terrified shout. He lurched upright, pain flaring in the stitched gash along his flank. In the lantern's dull circle, Razor stood, free manacles pried apart by a horseshoe nail now clutched between bloody fingers. Skinny lay unconscious at his feet. Razor's single good eye gleamed feral. "Morning, Judas," he hissed. "Thought I'd let your ghost rest, afraid not." Before Joaquin could raise the Colt, Razor shoved the lantern into the straw. Flame burst, smoke billowed. Razor vaulted past, snatching Callie's discarded apron from a peg. He slammed the hatch, bolting Joaquin inside with rising fire. Joaquin kicked the hatch twice before Sam hauled it open. Soot-coated, he staggered out and saw Razor galloping hellbent across the range on Eleanor's roan. A small figure slung across the saddle peak, Callie, limp apron gag, knotted at her mouth. Razor's gang was shattered, but he'd stolen a lifeline. Joaquin whistled for his paint mare, ignoring Eleanor's shout to wait. He grabbed a Winchester-stuffed spare cartridges, then spurred out hooves, drumming dirt clods. Sam and Otis prepared to follow, yet Joaquin waved them off. "One rider's quicker," he yelled. "Guard the ranch." The chase carved through greasewood flats into broken uplands where granite spires rose like weather-worn gravestones. Noon heat shimmered, but Razor never slowed, blood seeping from his bandaged shoulder, fury propelling him. At a narrow gulch, Joaquin closed to a rifle shot. He fired, shattering Razor's saddle cantle. The outlaw wheeled uphill toward a lone bluff orphan's knoll, an old burial mound, clay red against the sky. Razor hauled Callie down, half dragging her up the serpentine path gun to her ribs. Joaquin dismounted at the base, heart hammering. He started up the slope, weapon lowered. Wind moaned around stone stacks. Dust devils danced like lost souls. Drop iron dust wing Razor roared from the ridge crest, pressing the revolver under Callie's jaw. Drop it, or watch her brains paint sunset. Joaquin set the Winchester aside, but as he straightened, he palmed the peacemaker thumb resting on the lucky 5th round. He stepped into the open boots crunching shale. The burial cairn loomed behind razor-weathered rocks, stacked by grieving hands long gone. "Let the girl go, she's not your quarrel," Joaquin called, voice ragged. "Oh, she's every bit my leverage," Razor sneered. "Cost me gold, men pride. Now she costs you." He shoved Callie forward. She tripped, falling to her knees, gag sliding free. Her eyes wet, blazing, locked on Joaquin. Razor cocked the hammer. "Kneel, Judas. Beg." Joaquin sank slowly, palms open. Wind tore his coat edges. Sun glared, merciless. He breathed once, steadying. His left hand drifted to the revolver tucked behind hip leather. "You want repentance," he said. "Fine. I'm sorry for the smoke, the shot, the fear I seared into a child. I'm sorry I rode with you, learned your rot, but I'm done kneeling." He drew. The hill erupted. Razor jerked Callie sideways, firing wild. Bullet clipped Joaquin's shoulder, spun him, but his peacemaker barked once ordinary round-shattering Razor's gun hand. Metal flew. Razor roared, yanked a hidden derringer with his left. Callie bit his wrist. The tiny weapon dropped. She darted aside just as Razor lunged, bowie raised. Joaquin fired again, 6 inches high, deliberate, hitting Razor's thigh to stall his charge without killing him. Chamber clicked empty. Only the engraved bullet remained. Razor staggered, laughing through blood. "Still, the bad marksman, eh?" He lunged for Callie with the knife. She scrambled back. Shale gave under her heel. Razor's blade flashed. Joaquin leapt, ramming shoulder first, but momentum skidded them toward the cairn's edge, loose stones tumbling. Razor slashed Joaquin's forearm deep. Joaquin slammed a fist into the outlaw's jaw. The knife clattered away. They grappled, boots sliding on dust-slick rock. Callie seized the knife, but Joaquin shouted, "No." Her eyes widened, understanding this ending had to be his. Razor headbutted him, spit blood. "One last soul, Judas. Yours." Joaquin shoved clear, raised the revolver, thumbed back, the hammer engraved, round, chambered. He held Razor's gaze, then angled slightly, aiming past him. The shot cracked, striking the cairn's topmost stone. The weathered stack wavered, then collapsed, rocks avalanching. Razor twisted to dodge, too slow. A boulder caught his wounded leg, pinning him in scree. He howled, trapped. Joaquin approached, gun smoking. Razor reached futilely, curses fraying into whimpers. The outlaw's eyes, once pitiless, now pleaded. Joaquin paused, breath rasping. He could end it, one final shot. Instead, he holstered, turned away. Callie stood by the slope's rim chest, heaving. Joaquin managed a faint smile, then a gunshot cracked behind him. Razor had dragged the derringer from rubble, fired with trembling fingers. The slug tore Joaquin's back, punched out under his ribs. He staggered, knees buckling. Callie screamed, rushing forward, catching his weight. Razor's second barrel misfired. Hidden grit fouled the cap. He slumped unconscious. Joaquin clutched Callie's hand, warmth flooding out of him. "Told you. Square the ledger." Blood bubbled on his lips. Sunlit dust haloed them both. "You can't," Callie sobbed, pressing scrap cloth against the wound. "Not now. Listen," he whispered. "Forgive. Yourself. Too." His gaze drifted beyond her toward infinite pale sky. Breath eased from his lungs in a soft sigh, as though the wind itself carried him off. Callie shook, tears cutting clean tracks down her dirt-smeared face. She lowered him gently onto the earth, every heartbeat loud as gunfire in her ears. Around them, the hilltops stilled. Even the wind seemed to boo. Below, distant hoofbeats climbed Eleanor Sam Otis, racing up the trail they'd finally found. Callie rose, hand slick with his blood harmonica cold at her throat. She lifted it to trembling lips. A single low note unfurled across the knoll, mournful yet resolute, echoing down into the valley over the ranch through every cracked piece of land Joaquin had tried to mend. Eleanor reached the summit, eyes widening at the sight. She knelt beside Joaquin, fingers seeking a pulse she knew was gone. Sam and Otis shackled Razor anew, wordless. Callie's note faded. She held the harmonica tight. "He saved me," she managed. "Saved us all." Eleanor nodded, throat thick. "Then this hill remembers." She looked west, where dusk painted clouds the color of spilled blood. "We'll bury him here. Let the sun he faced bear witness." As they prepared a stretcher, Callie traced the feather scar on Joaquin's wrist, then pressed the bullet casing necklace into his stiffening fingers. The circle closed. She closed her own hand around the harmonica and stood watch while the last light burned crimson, promising that every evening hence a brass note would rise from Orphan's Knoll and carry Dustwing's name on the wind. Morning sunlight spilled over Orphan's Knoll in long, mild sheets, gentler than the fire-colored blaze that had crowned the hill the day Joaquin fell. Cattle lowed far below, and every rider from Gravel Bend to Dry Fork had gathered in a rangy crescent around a fresh-hewn pine coffin. The boards smelled of sap and summer. They had been planed overnight by half the crew hands, blistered but grateful for the work. Sam Lee stood guard in his best vest, Otis Brown doffed his hat, and Skinny Lewis held a single wildflower blue as the high desert sky for the man who had dragged him from a gun barrel. Father McCall's voice carried through the hush, a little hoarse from bruised ribs but steady. He spoke of debts paid and trails cleared, of how the good book reckons a man by the road he finishes, not the road he starts. When the prayer closed, Eleanor Whitfield stepped forward in her widow-black coat, silver hair loose to the wind, and set Joaquin's peacemaker atop the coffin lid. The revolver lay empty cylinder, locked, open, a symbol that its final purpose was served. She nodded to Skinny, and the boy placed his blue flower beside the weapon. Callie Harper moved last. She wore a clean calico dress harmonica stringed at her throat like a medal. In her palms lay two objects, the rimfire casing Joaquin had once carved with his crooked feather, and the folded governor's pardon delivered to the ranch gate by courier the previous dusk wax unbroken. She tucked both beneath the revolver's barrel, fingers lingering on the paper as though she might feel Joaquin's pulse still thrumming in the fibers. Then she raised the harmonica. A note drifted into the air, low, resolute, neither dirge nor dance. It held the hush of dawn before gunfire and the hush of twilight after. It bent softly in the middle like a knee taking weight, and straightened again into a pure, ringing clarity that floated on the warm updrafts spiraling above Dustwing's grave. Men whooped quietly or dabbed eyes. No one spoke until the last tremor faded into open blue. Sam and Otis lowered the coffin ropes, rasping. Earth thudded. With each shovel scoop, Callie thought of Joaquin's whispered charge, "Forgive yourself too," and tried to plant the words with the soil. When the mound was smooth, Eleanor drove a cedar post at its head and nailed on a hand-carved plank Joaquin Dustwing Rivas. He rode toward dawn. The letters were plain, but someone had etched a small feather beside the name pointing east. 3 days later, the ranch yard sounded again with hammer and saw, though this time it was Eleanor herself on the roof of the main barn prying loose the old brand board. The crew below watched puzzled as she hoisted a freshly painted panel bearing a stylized quill crossed over a sunrise arc. When it was fixed, she climbed down, hands tar-stained, and addressed the yard. "We've called this place Whitfield long enough," she announced. "From here on, every calf carries the Feather Sun brand. You'll answer to Dustwing Ranch in honor of a man who proved second chances earn their keep." No one objected. Even the wind seemed to nod through the mesquite. The work of rebuilding began at once. Fire-scarred rafters were replaced, charred fence posts resunk. Father McCall and Skinny scoured the hills for Razor's scattered horses. Sam took a posse east to deliver the outlaw shackled and silent to the county marshal. Word traveled with them how a dying gun hand had exchanged his last breath for a child's future and turned back a legend of fear. As summer settled, riders seeking employment drifted in ex-railroad men, freedmen to vaqueros from Chihuahua. Many carried sins heavy as iron. Eleanor hired nearly all. House of second trails, she'd say, pointing to Dustwing's grave on the knoll. We walk straight, but we remember crooked. Callie, scarcely 14, found herself at the center of a widening circle of younger ranch hands, runaway orphans, stagecoach beggar boys, and a shy Arapaho girl named Taya, seeking a place off the reservation road. Callie drilled them on fence knots, taught the three-note whistle that settled skittish steers, and when chores were done showed each how to grip a .22 without flinching. She did it the way Joaquin had coached her knees, soft breath, slow squeeze, don't jerk. For every shot that rang true, she'd nod, once eyes bright. For every miss, she repeated the lesson, patience welded to determination. The harmonica never left her neck. Some evenings, under the pink hush of sunset, she played the low note to bring the herd in, and steers would lift their heads as if they, too, recognized its promise. One copper-purple dusk, Father McCall limped to the corral rail where Callie supervised Tehia's roping practice. He carried the governor's pardon, now framed in plain cedar. "It's official," he said. "Signed, sealed, and though late delivered." Callie traced the ink flourish, cheeks tightening. "He wouldn't have read it," she murmured. "Perhaps not. But maybe you should." McCall handed the frame to her. "Let the paper remind you that laws can forgive after the fact. Hearts have to forgive in the moment." She nodded, set the frame against a post facing east so dawnlight would touch it first. Tehia loosed her lariat and whooped as it settled over a fence post clean. Skinny pumped a fist. Callie clapped laughter, ringing like the harmonica's brighter cousin. The sound startled her, the ease of it, but she didn't hush herself. Instead, she looked up at Orphan's Knoll. Late light caught the cedar plank there, making the carved feather glow. That night, a warm breeze carried camp coffee aroma across the yard. Cowboys lounged on hay bales, sharing stories that eased into silence thick with acceptance instead of suspicion. When the sky tipped into star-packed velvet, Callie climbed the knoll alone. She sat beside Dustwing's marker knees, tucked harmonica pressed to her lips. The single low note flowed out clear as creek water, and on its tail she threaded a second higher tone, hope climbing sorrow's spine. The two notes braided dip and rise until they hovered over the valley like twin lanterns. Below, a calf bawled, then quieted. Somewhere in the grass a nighthawk keened. Callie closed her eyes, listening to the blend of sound and stillness. She felt no ghost behind her, only the sure, solemn knowledge that a life could bend toward light after breaking, that wounds could root like seeds and send up green in the toughest ground. She slipped the harmonica back under her collar and rose. On the horizon, a pale silver band hinted at moonrise, its glow brushing the ranch roofs, the rebuilt barn, the busy windmill, every plank nailed by scarred hands learning to build instead of break. Callie started down the slope, feet sure, shoulders squared for the long ride ahead. Behind her, the feather on the marker pointed east, waiting for the next dawn. Dustwing's last stand still rings in the canyon air, but can a frontier built on gun smoke ever echo with music and love? Instead, which moment hit you hardest, and did Joaquin truly pay his debt, or is forgiveness still riding the wind? Smash like and comment your take below. Next time, the Prairie Swaps lead for lyrics when a black saloon queen and a Mexican drifter plot a midnight danza to outfox a railroad tyrant. Think forbidden chemistry, 6 shooters firing on the downbeat, and a blazing duet sung right on rails that could burn them both. Curious how love dares to sing over the roar of steel. Subscribe now and ring the bell so you don't miss a single note of the next video, because some frontiers are crossed with a heartbeat, not a bullet.